Your arrogance just cost you everything. Case dismissed, and next time show some respect. Judge Judy's words sliced through the courtroom like a blade through silk, each syllable delivered with surgical precision. Her voice low but loaded with the weight of absolute authority. The gavel came down. Crack. The sound reverberating through the studio like thunder, final and unforgiving. The defendant, a young woman in her mid-20s who'd walked in just 12 minutes earlier with a smirk and designer accessories, now stood frozen at the podium, her face drained of color, mouth hanging open in disbelief. Her hands, which had been casually examining her manicured nails moments before, now trembled visibly against the wooden surface. The gallery erupted. Gasps rippled through the packed rows of spectators, sharp and involuntary, followed by spontaneous applause, a rare occurrence in Judge Judy's courtroom, reserved only for the most satisfying moments of justice. One woman in the third row covered her mouth eyes wide. A man in the back shook his head slowly, a knowing smile spreading across his face. The plaintiff, standing at his podium across the aisle, exhaled deeply, his shoulders dropping with relief, vindication washing over his features. Bailiff Byrd, stationed at his usual post near the bench, maintained his professional composure, but the slightest raise of his eyebrows betrayed his reaction. Even he, after years of witnessing Judge Judy's legendary takedowns, recognized this as something special. The cameras, positioned strategically around the elevated courtroom set, captured every angle. The defendant's stunned expression, the gallery's reaction, Judge Judy's unflinching gaze as she closed the case file with deliberate finality. But how did it come to this? What transformed a routine small claims case about property damage into a 12-minute masterclass in consequences? What did this young woman say? What did she do that pushed Judge Judy to deliver such a devastating verdict? And more importantly, how did someone walk into that courtroom with such confidence, such attitude, only to leave completely shattered? Stay with me, because what you're about to witness isn't just a legal judgment. It's a lesson in respect, accountability, and what happens when arrogance meets someone who absolutely refuses to tolerate it. This is the story of a woman who thought she could mock Judge Judy and walk away unscathed. She was wrong. The stage was set in the iconic Judge Judy courtroom, a space that millions of viewers have come to recognize over 25 years of televised justice. The elevated bench, crafted from dark wood and polished to a shine, dominated the room, positioned beneath the American flag that hung as a constant reminder of the authority vested in this space. Two wooden podiums stood facing the bench, separated by several feet of neutral territory, each equipped with a microphone to capture every word, every sigh, every telling pause. Behind the bench, Judge Judy's chamber's door remained closed, the anticipation building as crew members made final adjustments. The gallery, 3 rows deep on each side of the center aisle, filled with spectators who'd waited hours for the chance to witness justice dispensed in real time. Some were tourists, others were court TV enthusiasts, but all of them leaned forward in their seats, sensing that today's cases might deliver the drama they'd hoped for. Studio lights blazed from overhead rigging, positioned to eliminate shadows, to make every gesture visible, every expression readable. The cameras, 4 of them surrounding the set like silent sentinels, blinked with red recording lights, their lenses trained on the empty podiums waiting. Producers behind the glass in the control room checked audio levels, adjusted camera angles, and reviewed the case file one last time. This particular case, on paper, seemed straightforward enough. Landlord versus tenant property damage dispute, $3,500 in claimed damages. But the notes attached to the file told a different story. Defendant described as difficult. Plaintiff frustrated and seeking accountability. The stage manager, clipboard in hand, gave the 5-minute warning. The energy in the room shifted, tightening like a coiled spring. This was Judge Judy's domain. Her kingdom. For over 2 decades, she'd built a reputation that transcended television, becoming a cultural icon of no-nonsense justice. Judith Scheindlin, former Manhattan family court judge, had heard thousands of cases in this very courtroom, cutting through lies with precision questions, demolishing excuses with logic, and delivering verdicts that left no room for appeal. She had zero tolerance for disrespect, negative patience for excuses, and an almost supernatural ability to read people within seconds of them opening their mouths. Litigants who entered her courtroom quickly learned there were rules. Don't interrupt. Don't lie. Don't waste her time. And above all, don't, under any circumstances, disrespect the process, the court, or Judge Judy herself. Those who followed these simple guidelines usually received fair if firm treatment. Those who didn't, they became cautionary tales, viral video clips, examples of what not to do when facing authority. Today's case involved a landlord, a middle-aged man named Robert Chen, who stood at the plaintiff's podium reviewing his notes one final time. He'd brought 3 folders stuffed with photographic evidence, receipts for repairs, and copies of the lease agreement. His posture spoke of exhaustion, the weariness of someone who'd tried reasoning, tried negotiating, and finally resorted to court as a last option. He wasn't here for revenge. He was here for accountability, for someone to finally tell his former tenant that actions have consequences. At the defendant's podium stood the young woman who would soon become the center of an unforgettable confrontation. She adjusted her designer purse on the podium's surface, the logo prominently displayed. Her outfit spoke of someone who'd dressed for attention. Expensive sneakers, distressed jeans that probably cost more than the security deposit she'd forfeited, a fitted jacket over a crop top. Fresh manicure, professionally done hair and makeup applied with precision. But it was her expression that told the real story. Her lips curved into a subtle smirk, the kind that broadcast confidence bordering on arrogance. She glanced around the courtroom with barely concealed disdain, as if this entire process was beneath her, an inconvenience she'd tolerate before returning to her real life. Her phone rested in her hand, thumb scrolling through social media even as the final preparations unfolded around her. She seemed utterly unconcerned about the proceedings, about the judge she was about to face, about the evidence stacked against her. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs. All rise. The command rippled through the courtroom like an electric current. Chairs scraped against the floor as spectators rose in unison, their conversations dying mid-sentence. The plaintiff straightened immediately, hands clasped respectfully in front of him. The defendant, however, took her time, sliding her phone into her pocket with deliberate slowness, rising with the casual indifference of someone waiting in line at a coffee shop, rather than standing before a judge. The chamber's door opened. Judge Judy emerged, her black robe flowing behind her as she crossed the threshold. With the confidence of someone who'd made this entrance thousands of times, she carried herself with an authority that didn't require announcement. It simply existed, filling the room before she'd even taken her seat. Her signature reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck, catching the studio lights. Her expression was neutral, professional, but her eyes, those penetrating brown eyes that had dissected countless litigants, surveyed the courtroom with the precision of a hawk scanning for prey. She ascended the steps to the bench, the elevation symbolic of the power vested in her position. Taking her seat, she adjusted her robe, opened the case file before her, and allowed herself a moment to scan the documents. The courtroom remained standing, silent, waiting for permission to sit. Judge Judy didn't rush. She flipped through several pages, her expression unchanging, absorbing the details of the case that would unfold before her. Finally, without looking up, she gestured with one hand. "Be seated." The courtroom exhaled collectively, settling back into their chairs. The cameras adjusted, focusing on the judge as she continued reading. The plaintiff stood at attention, waiting. The defendant shifted her weight from one foot to the other, already displaying the restlessness that would become her undoing. Judge Judy looked up, her gaze landing first on the plaintiff. "Mr. Chen, this is your case. Tell me what happened." Robert Chen cleared his throat, grateful for the opportunity to finally be heard. "Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I own a small apartment building in Queens. The defendant rented a one-bedroom unit from me starting in January of last year. She signed a standard lease, paid first month last month, and a security deposit of $1,500. Judge Judy nodded, making a note. And when she moved out 8 months later, Your Honor, the apartment was destroyed." His voice carried the strain of someone who'd been holding frustration inside for too long. Holes in the walls, carpet completely ruined, bleach stains, burn marks, cabinet doors ripped off, even damage to the bathroom fixtures. "I've owned that building for 15 years. I've had dozens of tenants. I've never seen anything like this. Do you have photographs?" Judge Judy asked, her tone matter-of-fact. "Yes, Your Honor." Chen opened his first folder, producing a stack of printed photos. The bailiff stepped forward, taking them from Chen and carrying them to the bench. Judge Judy accepted them, spreading several across her workspace. Her expression tightened almost imperceptibly as she examined each image. A hole in drywall, easily 3 feet in diameter, the edges jagged and violent. Carpet so stained it looked like a crime scene. Kitchen cabinets hanging from broken hinges. A bathroom mirror cracked in a spiderweb pattern. These weren't the normal wear and tear of daily living. This was destruction, pure and simple. "And you're seeking $3,500? Judge Judy asked, still studying the photos. "Yes, Your Honor, that's the estimate for repairs. I had 3 contractors give me quotes. That's the lowest one." Judge Judy set down the photos, turning her attention to the defendant for the first time. The young woman stood at her podium, arms crossed loosely, her expression hovering somewhere between bored and annoyed. The contrast between the two litigants couldn't have been more stark. Chen, earnest and prepared. The defendant, dismissive and unengaged. "What's your name?" Judge Judy asked, her voice neutral but her eyes sharp. Brianna Foster." The response came with a shrug, as if the question itself was unnecessary. Miss Foster, you lived in this apartment for how long? Another shrug. Like 8 months. Maybe 9. I don't know exactly. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed fractionally. You don't know exactly? You either lived there 8 months or 9 months. Which is it? Brianna shifted, uncrossing her arms only to cross them again in a different configuration. 8 months. It was 8 months. And did you cause this damage? Judge Judy gestured toward the photo spread across her bench. Some of it, I guess. Brianna's tone carried the practiced indifference of someone who'd been making excuses her entire life. But the place was already messed up when I moved in. Like the walls were weak and the carpet was old and— Stop. Judge Judy raised one hand, palm out. The single word carried the force of a full sentence. Do you have any photographs from when you moved in showing this pre-existing damage? Brianna blinked. No. I didn't think to take pictures. You didn't think to document the condition of an apartment before moving in, even though you paid a $1,500 security deposit? I mean, no. That's not really my responsibility, is it? The gallery murmured softly. A few spectators exchanged glances, eyebrows raised. The plaintiff shook his head slowly, as if he'd heard this exact argument before. Judge Judy's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, a warning signal that Brianna, absorbed in her own certainty, completely missed. Actually, Miss Foster, it is your responsibility. When you sign a lease and accept a property, documenting its condition protects you. But let's move on. Judge Judy picked up one of the photos, holding it up so the camera could capture it clearly. This hole in the wall is 3 feet wide. How did this happen? Brianna glanced at the photo, barely interested. I don't know. Maybe I hung something heavy? The walls were cheap. Cheap walls don't develop 3-foot holes from hanging pictures. Well, I don't know what to tell you. The response came with a hint of attitude, a slight edge creeping into Brianna's voice. Maybe it was already there and I just didn't notice. Judge Judy set the photo down slowly, deliberately. She leaned back in her chair, studying the defendant with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. You're telling me you lived in this apartment for 8 months and didn't notice a 3-foot hole in your living room wall? I mean, it might have gotten bigger over time. The excuse hung in the air, thin and transparent. Mr. Chen at his podium pinched the bridge of his nose, fighting back visible frustration. The gallery's murmurs grew slightly louder, the collective disbelief building. Judge Judy leaned forward again, her patience, legendary in its brevity, already beginning to wear thin. Miss Foster, let me explain something to you. In my courtroom you have 2 choices. You can tell me the truth or you can waste my time with nonsense. Which one are you choosing right now? Brianna's phone buzzed audibly in her pocket. The buzz cut through the tension like a razor. Every head in the courtroom turned toward the defendant's podium. Judge Judy's eyes locked onto Brianna with the intensity of a laser beam, her expression shifting from professional scrutiny to barely contained disbelief. Is that your phone? The question emerged quietly, almost conversationally, but anyone familiar with Judge Judy knew this tone. It was the calm before the storm, the warning shot before the full assault. Brianna's hand moved instinctively toward her pocket, fingers brushing the fabric. Yeah, it's just, take it out and turn it off. Now. Each word landed with increasing weight, the volume rising slightly, the authority undeniable. Brianna hesitated, her face registering confusion as if she couldn't quite comprehend why this was a problem. It's just a text message. I can ignore it. I didn't ask if you could ignore it. I told you to take it out and turn it off. Judge Judy's voice climbed another notch, filling the courtroom. Do you think you're at a shopping mall? Do you think this is your living room? This is a courtroom, and when you're in my courtroom, your phone is off. The gallery sat frozen, spectators' eyes wide, sensing they were witnessing the beginning of something explosive. The camera zoomed in on Brianna's face, capturing the flicker of annoyance that crossed her features. Not embarrassment, not contrition, but irritation at being called out. She pulled the phone from her pocket with exaggerated slowness, made a show of pressing the power button and slid it back into her jacket. Happy? The word escaped before she could stop it, barely audible but picked up perfectly by the sensitive microphone at her podium. The courtroom gasped. A woman in the second row actually put her hand over her heart. Mr. Chen's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly reached his hairline. Bailiff Byrd shifted his stance, his professional neutrality cracking ever so slightly as his eyes widened. Judge Judy's expression transformed. The professional mask she wore, the one maintained through thousands of cases, slipped just enough to reveal the steel underneath. She set down her pen with deliberate care, removed her reading glasses and folded them slowly, the small actions somehow more terrifying than if she'd started yelling. What did you just say to me? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Brianna's confidence wavered for the first time, a crack appearing in her armor of arrogance. She swallowed visibly, seeming to realize, perhaps too late, that she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. I didn't mean, she stammered. No. You said happy, as if turning off your phone in my courtroom is some kind of inconvenience I'm imposing on you. Judge Judy's voice dropped back to that dangerous quiet, more menacing than shouting. Let me make something crystal clear, Miss Foster. You're not doing me a favor by being respectful. Respect in this courtroom isn't optional. It's mandatory. Do you understand the difference? Brianna nodded quickly, too quickly, her previous bravado evaporating. Yes, Your Honor. I'm not convinced you do, but we'll see. Judge Judy put her glasses back on, returning to the photos spread before her. Let's talk about this carpet. These aren't normal wear and tear stains. This is bleach damage, burn marks. What happened here? Brianna seized the opportunity to move past her mistake, jumping back into excuse mode. Okay, so like I had some friends over one time and somebody might have spilled something. Somebody? Judge Judy interrupted, not looking up from the photos. Who's somebody? You're the tenant. You're responsible for whoever enters that apartment. I know, but I can't control what other people do. Yes, you can. It's called not inviting them back. It's called supervising your guests. It's called taking responsibility. Judge Judy looked up, pinning Brianna with her gaze. But taking responsibility doesn't seem to be your strong suit, does it? The defendant's jaw tightened, her hands gripping the podium edge. That's not fair. You don't even know me. I know what I see in front of me. Judge Judy gestured toward the evidence. I see $3,500 in damage. I see someone who documented nothing when she moved in, claimed everything was already broken, and takes zero accountability for the destruction she caused. That's what I know. Brianna's frustration mounted, her voice rising defensively. You're already taking his side. You haven't even heard my whole story. The gallery erupted in louder murmurs. This was escalating faster than anyone expected. Mr. Chen stood silently at his podium, letting Judge Judy handle what he'd been unable to handle for months, making this young woman face reality. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice cutting through the noise. I don't take sides, Miss Foster. I follow evidence. And so far, all the evidence points to you destroying someone's property and making excuses. If you have actual evidence to present, photos, witnesses, documentation, now's the time. Otherwise, stop wasting oxygen telling me what you think is fair. Brianna's face flushed red, anger and embarrassment mixing in equal measure. She looked down at the podium, at the empty surface where evidence should have been, where preparation should have existed. She had nothing. No photos, no witnesses, no documentation, just excuses and attitude, and both were failing her spectacularly. I don't have pictures. But that doesn't mean I'm lying, she said, her voice tight with frustration. No, but it means you have no proof. And in a court of law, proof matters more than your feelings. Judge Judy picked up another photo, this one showing a cabinet door hanging by a single hinge. How about this? The cabinet just fell apart on its own? Those cabinets were cheap. They were already loose when I moved in. Everything was already broken, everything was cheap, nothing is your fault. Judge Judy's voice dripped with sarcasm. Do you hear yourself? Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? Brianna's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted to the gallery, looking for sympathy, for support, for anyone who might validate her position. She found none. Every face in the audience reflected the same judgment, the same disbelief at her transparent excuses. Judge Judy continued, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. Let me tell you something about being an adult, Miss Foster. Adults take responsibility. Adults document things. Adults don't destroy other people's property and then blame the property for being destroyable. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understand you're not listening to me. Wrong. The word exploded from Judge Judy like a gunshot. I'm listening to every word. The problem is, every word you're saying is an excuse. I've been doing this for 25 years. Do you know how many people have stood where you're standing right now and told me everything was broken before they got there? Thousands. And do you know what they all have in common? Not one shred of evidence. The courtroom sat in electric silence, every person leaning forward, sensing they were watching something special unfold. Brianna stood at her podium, her earlier confidence completely shattered, replaced by visible frustration and barely suppressed anger. Her hands trembled slightly as they gripped the wood. Her jaw clenched and unclenched. Judge Judy wasn't finished. Judge Judy closed the folder in front of her with a deliberate snap, the sound echoing through the courtroom like a punctuation mark. She leaned back in her chair, studying Brianna with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a particularly challenging case. The defendant stood rigid at her podium, her breathing slightly elevated, her composure fraying at the edges like worn fabric. Let's try this differently, Judge Judy said, her tone shifting to something almost conversational, though anyone who knew her recognized this as a tactical maneuver. You say the apartment was already damaged when you moved in. Fine. Did you tell Mr. Chen about these problems when you moved in? Brianna hesitated, sensing a trap but unable to identify where it lay. I mean, I mentioned some stuff. Some stuff? Judge Judy's eyebrows arched. Did you or did you not put anything in writing? An email, a text message? Anything? No, but did you ask him to fix anything during the 8 months you lived there? Another pause. Brianna shifted her weight from foot to foot, her designer sneakers squeaking slightly against the floor. Not really no. Not really no, or definitely no. I didn't ask him to fix anything, Brianna admitted, her voice tight with reluctance. Judge Judy nodded slowly as if confirming a hypothesis. So let me make sure I understand your story. You moved into an apartment that was, according to you, already damaged. Walls were weak, cabinets were loose, carpet was stained. But in 8 months you never once contacted your landlord to report these problems or request repairs. Does that make sense to you? The logic was inescapable, a noose tightening with each word. Brianna's face flushed deeper, her frustration mounting. I didn't think I had to. It wasn't my job to. It absolutely was your job. Judge Judy's voice rose, cutting through the excuse like a hot knife through butter. When you rent a property and there are problems, you report them. That's how landlord-tenant relationships work. You don't get to live there for 8 months, destroy the place, and then claim everything was already broken. That's called fraud, Miss Foster. The word hung in the air. Fraud. The gallery murmured louder now, heads shaking, spectators whispering to each other. Mr. Chen nodded vigorously at his podium, vindication spreading across his features. Brianna's hands clenched into fists at her sides. I'm not committing fraud, she protested, her voice climbing toward shrill. I'm just telling you what happened. No, you're telling me what you wish happened. There's a difference. Judge Judy picked up the photo of the massive wall hole again, holding it up so the entire courtroom could see. This hole, 3 feet wide. Explain to me how this happened. Brianna glanced at the photo, her mind clearly racing for an explanation that might sound plausible. I think maybe when I was moving furniture, something hit the wall. Something hit the wall with enough force to create a 3-foot hole and you didn't notice it happening? It was loud when I was moving. There was a lot going on. Stop talking. Judge Judy's hand went up again, the universal signal for silence. Every word that comes out of your mouth makes you sound less credible. Let me ask you something else. How did you pay your rent? The question shift caught Brianna off guard. What? Your rent?
How did you pay it?
Check, cash, money order, mostly Venmo or Zelle, sometimes cash. And did Mr. Chen ever complain about late payments? Brianna's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicious of where this line of questioning led. No, I paid on time. So you were responsible enough to pay rent on time for 8 months, but you're telling me you weren't responsible enough to report major structural damage to the apartment? Judge Judy's voice dripped with sarcasm. Which is it? Are you responsible or irresponsible? The trap had sprung. Brianna opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing anything she said would contradict her earlier arguments. The gallery sensed it too. The slight lean forward, the increased attention, the anticipation of watching someone realize they'd backed themselves into a corner with no exit. Judge Judy didn't wait for an answer. She turned to Mr. Chen. Did she ever complain to you about the condition of the apartment? Never, Your Honor, Chen replied immediately, his voice carrying the weight of truth. Not once in 8 months. The first time I heard anything was wrong was when I went to inspect after she moved out. That's when I saw the damage. And what was her response when you showed her the damage? Chen's expression darkened at the memory. She laughed, Your Honor. She actually laughed and said, "You good luck getting money from me." Then she got in her car and drove away. The courtroom erupted. Gasps spread through the gallery like wildfire, followed by angry murmurs and shocked whispers. Several spectators shook their heads in disgust. One elderly woman in the front row said, "Unbelievable," loud enough for the microphones to catch. Judge Judy's eyes snapped back to Brianna, who'd gone pale at the revelation. Is that true? Did you laugh at him? I didn't. That's not. He's making it sound worse than it was. Brianna stammered, her carefully constructed denials crumbling. I might have said something, but I wasn't serious. I was just frustrated. You laughed at a man whose property you destroyed and told him good luck getting money from you? Judge Judy's voice climbed steadily. And you wonder why you're standing in my courtroom right now? This is ridiculous. Brianna's frustration finally boiled over, her voice rising to match the judge's. You're twisting everything I'm saying. You're not even trying to understand my side. The courtroom froze. The words echoed off the walls, hanging in the charged air. Several spectators gasped audibly. Mr. Chen's eyebrows shot up again. Bailiff Byrd's hand moved slightly, instinctively, though he remained at his post. The camera zoomed in on Judge Judy's face, capturing the moment her expression shifted from stern to absolutely glacial. "Excuse me," the two words emerged quietly, dangerously quiet. "What did you just say to me?" Brianna seemed to realize too late that she'd just committed an unforgivable sin. She'd raised her voice to Judge Judy. She'd accused the judge of not listening, of twisting her words. In the hierarchy of courtroom mistakes, this ranked near the top of offenses that guaranteed a devastating outcome. "I just meant—" Brianna tried to backtrack, her voice smaller now, fear creeping in. "No, you accused me of not trying to understand. Let me tell you something, young lady. I understand perfectly. I understand you're someone who takes no responsibility for their actions. I understand you're someone who destroys other people's property and then makes excuses. I understand you're someone who laughs at people you've wronged. What I don't understand is how you thought coming into my courtroom with this attitude was going to work out well for you." Brianna's lip trembled slightly. She looked down at her podium, unable to meet Judge Judy's withering gaze. The confident young woman who'd walked in examining her manicure and scrolling through her phone had been reduced to something smaller. Cornered, exposed. But she wasn't done making mistakes. Judge Judy returned to the evidence, picking up a photo showing the destroyed carpet. "Let's talk about these bleach stains and burn marks. How did those happen?" Brianna's voice emerged barely above a whisper. "I already told you. A friend spilled something." "A friend spilled bleach? Multiple times? In different rooms?" Judge Judy's skepticism was palpable. "I guess so. I don't remember exactly." "You don't remember how your carpet got destroyed? It was a long time ago." 8 months ago is not a long time, Miss Foster." Brianna's hands clenched the podium again, her knuckles whitening. Under her breath, just barely audible, she muttered something. The words were quiet, spoken toward the podium rather than into the microphone, but in the silence of the courtroom, they carried, "Yeah, whatever you say." And then, in a moment of catastrophic judgment, she continued even quieter, mimicking Judge Judy's distinctive tone with mocking sarcasm. "It's not a long time, Miss Foster." The microphone caught it, every single word. The courtroom exploded. The reaction was instantaneous and visceral. The gallery erupted in gasps so sharp they sounded like a collective intake of breath before drowning. Several spectators stood halfway out of their seats, hands flying to their mouths in shock. A man in the back row said, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear. The woman in the front row who'd spoken earlier now stared with her jaw hanging open, eyes wide with disbelief. Mr. Chen at the plaintiff's podium froze completely, his papers forgotten in his hands, staring at Brianna as if she'd just committed professional suicide right in front of him, which, in a sense, she had. His expression cycled rapidly through shock, vindication, and something approaching pity for what was about to happen. Bailiff Byrd's professional composure finally cracked. His eyebrows raised so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline, and he shifted his stance, his body language screaming, "Did she really just do that?" without him saying a single word. Even he, after years of seeing litigants make terrible decisions in this courtroom, seemed stunned by the magnitude of this particular mistake. The cameras captured everything. Brianna's face as realization dawned, the color draining from her cheeks, her eyes widening, her hand moving toward her mouth as if she could somehow stuff the words back in. The split-screen feed showed Judge Judy's expression transforming in real time, from stern authority to something far more dangerous, cold, calculated fury wrapped in deadly calm. Judge Judy set down the photo she'd been holding. The motion was slow, deliberate, terrifying in its control. She removed her reading glasses again, folding them with precise movements that seemed to stretch for an eternity. The courtroom held its breath, the silence so complete that the hum of the studio lights became audible. Every eye fixed on the bench, waiting for the hammer to fall. "What did you just say?" Each word emerged separately, distinctly, coated in ice. Brianna's trembling became visible from across the courtroom. Her hands shook against the podium. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Nothing, Your Honor, I didn't. You mocked me." The statement wasn't a question. It was a declaration, a verdict in itself. "You stood in my courtroom and you mocked me. You mimicked my voice. I didn't mean to." Brianna's words tumbled out in a desperate rush, tripping over each other. "The microphone doesn't lie, Miss Foster. Every person in this courtroom heard you. Every camera recorded it. You mocked a sitting judge during active proceedings." Judge Judy's voice remained eerily quiet, more terrifying than if she'd been shouting. "In 25 years on this bench, I have seen a lot of stupid behavior. Lying, cheating, violence, theft, I've seen it all. But you—" She paused, letting the silence amplify her words. "You just did something truly special." Brianna's eyes glistened with tears now, but they were tears of fear and humiliation, rather than genuine remorse. Her entire body language had transformed from defensive arrogance to cornered animal. She looked toward the exit, as if calculating whether she could simply run. But Bailiff Byrd's position near the door eliminated that fantasy. "Your Honor." "Please, I'm sorry." Brianna's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. "You're sorry?" Judge Judy's eyebrows arched with theatrical disbelief. "You're sorry you got caught, there's a difference. If that microphone hadn't picked it up, you'd still be standing there with that smirk on your face, thinking you got away with disrespecting me." The gallery murmured in agreement, heads nodding. The spectators had transformed from neutral observers into a jury of public opinion, and their verdict was unanimous. Several people pulled out phones, recording the moment, knowing they were witnessing something that would go viral within hours. Judge Judy leaned forward, her hands clasped on the bench, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher, delivering a lesson to a particularly difficult student. "Let me explain something to you about respect, Miss Foster. Respect isn't something you give when it's convenient. It's not optional based on your mood. In a courtroom, in any courtroom, respect for the judge, for the process, for the institution of justice itself, is mandatory. Not because I have an ego that needs feeding, but because without respect for the law, we have chaos." Brianna nodded frantically, tears now streaming down her face, mascara beginning to run in dark tracks. "I understand, Your Honor, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake." "You've made multiple mistakes," Judge Judy corrected, her voice sharp. "You destroyed property. You lied about it. You failed to document anything. You showed up here unprepared. You looked at your phone. You talked back. You raised your voice to me. And then you mocked me. That's not a mistake, Miss Foster. That's a pattern. That's who you are." The words landed like physical blows. Brianna flinched with each accusation, her shoulders hunching, her confident posture from earlier completely obliterated. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, as if Judge Judy's words had actual weight that pressed down on her. Mr. Chen stood silently at his podium, no longer needing to argue his case. Judge Judy was doing it for him, exposing everything he'd experienced dealing with this tenant. The excuses, the attitude, the complete lack of accountability. His expression showed something like relief mixed with satisfaction. After months of frustration, someone with authority was finally making this woman face consequences. Judge Judy picked up the entire stack of photographs, fanning them out across her bench like a dealer spreading cards. "Let's talk about what's really happening here. You're a young woman who's never been told no. You've gotten by on excuses and charm and deflection your entire life. You've convinced yourself that rules don't apply to you, that you can talk your way out of anything, that somehow you're special enough to avoid consequences." She picked up one photo, the 3-foot hole in the wall, holding it up for the cameras. "This hole represents your accountability, non-existent. Massive damage that you claim just appeared, just happened, wasn't your fault." She set it down, picking up another, the destroyed carpet. "These stains represent your honesty. Bleached away, burned through, ruined beyond repair." The metaphors hit hard, the gallery hanging on every word. This wasn't just about property damage anymore. This was about character, about integrity, about the kind of person who destroys things and blames everyone else. Brianna wiped at her face with shaking hands, smearing her makeup further. "Your Honor, please, I'm not finished." Judge Judy's hand went up, silencing her. "You came into my courtroom today thinking what? That you'd charm me? That you'd make excuses and I'd believe them? That you'd walk out of here paying nothing?" She shook her head slowly. "You fundamentally misunderstood who you were dealing with." The courtroom sat in rapt attention. This had transcended a typical Judge Judy case. This was a masterclass in accountability, in what happens when arrogance meets immovable authority. The cameras captured every angle. Brianna's tear-stained face, Judge Judy's stern expression, the plaintiff's vindicated posture, the gallery's invested reactions. Judge Judy began gathering the photos back into a stack, her movements methodical. "Here's what's going to happen now. I'm going to review this evidence. I'm going to calculate damages, and then I'm going to render a verdict that reflects not just the property destruction, but your behavior in this courtroom today." Brianna's voice emerged as a broken whisper. "Yes, Your Honor. And Miss Foster?" Judge Judy looked up one more time, pinning the defendant with her gaze. "That mockery you just did, that just cost you more money than you can imagine." Judge Judy opened a fresh page in her legal pad, uncapping her pen with a deliberate motion that somehow felt ominous. The courtroom remained frozen in anticipation, every spectator leaning forward, sensing that the final act was approaching. Brianna stood at her podium, trying unsuccessfully to compose herself, wiping at her face with trembling hands, her breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. "Let's go through this systematically," Judge Judy said, her voice taking on the clinical precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Mr. Chen, you have documentation of the repair estimates? Yes, Your Honor. Chen immediately produced another folder, this one filled with itemized quotes from contractors. Bailiff Byrd retrieved them, delivering them to the bench. Judge Judy spread the papers out, her eyes scanning the numbers with practiced efficiency. Wall repair for the hole in the living room. She read aloud. $800. She looked up at Brianna. That's your doing? Brianna's voice came out hoarse, defeated. Yes, Your Honor. Carpet replacement for all rooms due to bleach and burn damage, $1,200. Judge Judy's pen moved across her pad, tallying. Also your responsibility? Yes, Your Honor. Kitchen cabinet repairs. 3 cabinet doors completely destroyed, hinges broken on 2 others, $350. The pen scratched against paper. Yours? Brianna nodded, no longer trusting her voice. I need to hear you say it, Miss Foster. The microphone needs your verbal confirmation. Yes, Your Honor. That was me. Judge Judy continued down the list with methodical precision, each item a nail in the coffin of Brianna's defense. Bathroom mirror replacement, $200. Bathroom fixture repairs where the towel bar was ripped from the wall, $150. Deep cleaning required due to excessive filth and cigarette smoke damage, $400. At the mention of cigarette smoke, Brianna's head snapped up. Wait, I don't smoke? That's not fair. Did you allow people who smoke in the apartment? Judge Judy interrupted, not even looking up from the documents. Brianna hesitated. Maybe sometimes, but then you're responsible. Next item, refrigerator door handle broken off, $90. Closet door off its track, frame damaged, $120. Light fixtures damaged in 2 rooms, $130. The pen continued its relentless scratching, the numbers mounting with each line. The gallery watched in fascinated silence as the financial reality built like a wave preparing to crash. Mr. Chen stood at his podium with his arms crossed now, a slight smile playing at his lips. After months of dealing with Brianna's excuses and deflections, watching Judge Judy dismantle her defenses piece by piece provided a satisfaction he'd never expected to feel. Window screen torn in bedroom, $40. Venetian blinds destroyed, $60. Scuff marks and gouges on hardwood floor and hallway requiring professional refinishing, $280. Judge Judy's voice remained steady. Emotionless, the numbers piling up like stones on a grave marker. Burns on the kitchen countertop from hot pans placed directly on the surface, $170 for counter resurfacing. Brianna had stopped trying to maintain any composure. She leaned heavily on the podium, her shoulders shaking, tears flowing freely now. The confident young woman who'd walked in scrolling through her phone had been completely dismantled, replaced by someone facing the full weight of consequences for the first time in her life. Judge Judy finally set down her pen, picking up her calculator. The soft beeping of keys being pressed was the only sound in the courtroom as she tallied the total. The seconds stretched out interminably. Finally, she looked up, her expression grave. The total documented damages come to $3,490. Your security deposit was $1,500, which Mr. Chen has already applied to these costs. That leaves a balance of, she paused, letting the moment stretch, $1,990 that you owe him. Brianna's face went from pale to gray. Your Honor, I don't have that kind of money. You should have thought about that before you destroyed someone else's property. Judge Judy's response was swift and merciless. But we're not done yet, Miss Foster. Not even close. The word sent a chill through the courtroom. If the damages weren't the end of it, what else was coming? The spectators exchanged glances, sensing something bigger building. The camera zoomed in on Judge Judy's face, capturing the set of her jaw, the intensity in her eyes. Mr. Chen, did you have to take time off work to deal with these repairs? Judge Judy asked. Yes, Your Honor. 3 days coordinating contractors, meeting with them, overseeing the work. I'm a small business owner. I lost income because of this. And did you incur any additional costs? Storage fees for her belongings that she abandoned? Legal fees preparing for this case? Chen nodded. She left behind furniture and boxes of personal items. I had to pay to have it stored for 30 days as required by law before I could dispose of it. That was $250. And I paid a lawyer $200 to review my case before coming here. Judge Judy nodded, making additional notes. So we're now at $2,440 in documented losses and expenses. She looked directly at Brianna. Do you have anything to say? Any evidence you'd like to present? Any witnesses? Any documentation whatsoever that supports any part of your story? Brianna shook her head mutely, tears dripping onto the podium surface. I didn't think so. Judge Judy set down her pen one final time, the gesture carrying an air of finality. Here's what I find particularly offensive about your case, Miss Foster. It's not just that you destroyed property. People make mistakes, accidents happen. It's not even that you lied about it. People lie to save themselves all the time. What's offensive is that you came into this courtroom with zero remorse, zero accountability, and zero respect. The gallery murmured in agreement. Several people nodded vigorously. One woman said, "That's right," just loud enough to be heard. You rolled your eyes. You looked at your phone. You interrupted me. You raised your voice to me. And then... Judge Judy's voice rose slightly. You mocked me. You stood in a court of law and mimicked a judge's voice like a petulant child who didn't get her way. Brianna's shoulders heaved with silent sobs. Mr. Chen watched with his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes showed satisfaction. Justice, real justice, was finally being served. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her hands folded on the bench, studying Brianna with an expression that mixed disappointment and disgust. You know what the real tragedy here is, Miss Foster? You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. But instead of learning from your mistakes, instead of growing up and taking responsibility, you double down on immaturity. You blame everyone else. You make excuses. You show disrespect to people trying to hold you accountable. The courtroom hung on every word, the silence so complete that the mechanical hum of the cameras was audible. Well, let me teach you something about consequences that apparently nobody else in your life has bothered to teach you. Judge Judy picked up her gavel. The moment had arrived. Judge Judy's hand rested on the gavel, but she didn't strike it yet. The pause stretched, elastic and unbearable, filling the courtroom with anticipation so thick it was almost suffocating. Every eye remained fixed on the bench, every breath held. Even the cameramen seemed to lean in closer, as if afraid to miss a single syllable of what was coming. Judgment for the plaintiff, Judge Judy began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. In the amount of $2,440, Brianna exhaled audibly, a sound somewhere between relief and despair. The number was devastating, but at least it was over. At least she could leave this courtroom and try to put this nightmare behind her. Her hands loosened slightly on the podium, her shoulders dropping as the tension began to release. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. However, the single word stopped Brianna's premature relief dead in its tracks. Her head snapped up, eyes widening with new fear. The judge leaned forward, her expression hardening even further. We need to address your behavior in my courtroom today. The gallery's murmuring intensified. This was unprecedented territory. Most cases ended with a simple judgment and dismissal. Whatever was coming next was something special. Something earned through Brianna's spectacular display of disrespect. You came in here unprepared, which shows poor judgment, Judge Judy continued, her voice taking on the cadence of a prosecutor building a case. You made excuses instead of taking responsibility, which shows weak character. You interrupted me, which shows lack of discipline. You raised your voice to me, which shows lack of respect. Each accusation landed like a physical blow. Brianna's tears flowed faster, her face crumbling as the litany of her failures echoed through the courtroom. Mr. Chen at his podium stood straighter, sensing vindication approaching on a scale he'd never imagined. But then, Judge Judy's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet again. You crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. You mocked me. You mimicked my voice in a deliberate act of disrespect toward this court, toward the judicial process, and toward the institution of law itself. Bailiff Byrd shifted his weight, his expression grave. The spectators sat frozen, afraid that any movement might break the spell of this moment. The cameras captured it all. Judge Judy's controlled fury, Brianna's complete breakdown, the electric atmosphere charging every corner of the room. In all my years on this bench, I have given people second chances. I've been lenient with litigants who show genuine remorse. I've reduced judgments for people who demonstrated they understood their mistakes and wanted to do better. Judge Judy paused, her eyes boring into Brianna with laser intensity. But you showed none of those qualities. Instead, you showed contempt, and contempt in my courtroom has consequences. Brianna's legs visibly trembled. She gripped the podium to keep from collapsing, her knuckles white with the effort. Your Honor, please, she whispered, but her voice died as Judge Judy raised one hand. I'm adding the plaintiff's court costs to your judgment. An additional $250. Gasps rippled through the gallery. That brought the total to $2,690, nearly double her original security deposit. Brianna's face went from gray to white, the blood draining so completely she looked like she might faint. But Judge Judy still wasn't done. Furthermore, she continued, her voice gaining momentum like a boulder rolling downhill, you are going to write a formal letter of apology to Mr. Chen, not an email, not a text message, a handwritten letter on proper stationery, acknowledging the damage you caused and the disrespect you showed. You will mail that letter within 30 days of this judgment. Mr. Chen's eyes widened slightly, surprise and satisfaction mixing on his features. The gallery murmured approvingly. Several people nodded, clearly thinking this was fitting justice. And if you fail to send that letter within 30 days, Judge Judy's voice took on an edge sharp enough to cut steel, I will add another $500 to your judgment. Do you understand me? Yes, Your Honor, Brianna choked out, her voice barely audible through her tears. I'm not sure you do understand. Judge Judy leaned forward one final time, her face a mask of righteous anger tempered by judicial control. You walked into this courtroom thinking you could charm your way out of responsibility. You thought rules didn't apply to you. You thought respect was optional. You thought you could mock authority without consequences. The words came faster now, building to the crescendo everyone sensed was coming. The courtroom held its collective breath, waiting for the final blow. But let me make something absolutely clear to you, Miss Foster. Judge Judy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, yet somehow it filled every corner of the room, resonating with power. Your arrogance just cost you everything. The words hung in the air like a verdict from the universe itself. You're paying $2,690 for property damage. You're writing an apology letter under penalty of additional fines, and you're learning right here, right now, in front of these cameras and these witnesses, that actions have consequences. Words have weight and respect is not negotiable. Judge Judy picked up her gavel, holding it aloft. The motion seemed to happen in slow motion, the courtroom frozen in anticipation of the final decisive sound that would seal Brianna's fate. Case dismissed. The words came sharp and final. And next time, Miss Foster, if there is a next time, show some respect. The gavel came down. Crack. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap, reverberating off the walls, the ceiling, the very air itself. It was a sound of finality, of justice served, of consequences delivered without mercy but with absolute fairness. The gallery erupted. Applause broke out spontaneously, something rarely heard in Judge Judy's courtroom but entirely appropriate for this moment. Spectators clapped, some standing, others nodding vigorously in approval. The woman in the front row who'd been reacting throughout the trial actually pumped her fist in the air. A man in the back shouted, "Yes!" before catching himself. Mr. Chen at the plaintiff's podium stood with his head bowed slightly, his expression showing relief so profound it bordered on emotional. His shoulders, which had been tight with tension when he'd entered, finally relaxed. He'd come seeking accountability, and he'd received it in spectacular fashion. Judge Judy had done more than rule in his favor. She'd validated every frustration he'd experienced dealing with this tenant, every excuse he'd endured, every disrespectful interaction he'd suffered through. Brianna stood frozen at her podium, completely shattered. The tears streamed unchecked down her face, taking the last remnants of her makeup with them. Her expensive outfit, her designer accessories, her carefully styled appearance, none of it mattered now. She'd been stripped down to her core character, and that character had been found wanting. Her hands trembled violently against the wood. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The confident smirk from earlier had been replaced by the stunned expression of someone who'd just walked into a wall they never saw coming. Bailiff Byrd gestured toward the exit, his movement gentle but firm. Brianna needed to leave the courtroom, to walk away from the scene of her public humiliation. She pushed herself away from the podium on unsteady legs, stumbling slightly as she turned toward the door. The walk from the podium to the exit couldn't have been more than 20 feet, but it stretched before her like a mile of shame. The gallery watched in silence now, the applause dying down, replaced by something closer to solemn observation. This wasn't celebration of someone's pain, it was acknowledgement that justice, real justice, had been served. A few spectators shook their heads, not in judgment but in that universal gesture of, what was she thinking? Judge Judy remained seated at her bench, her expression neutral now, professional mask back in place. She'd delivered the lesson she'd set out to deliver. Whether Brianna would learn from it remained to be seen, but the education had been provided in the most thorough way possible. Now that is justice served ice cold. If you loved watching Judge Judy absolutely dismantle that attitude, smash that like button right now and drop a comment below. Do you think Judy went too far, or did Brianna get exactly what she deserved? Be honest, I want to hear your real take on this. Have you ever seen someone show that level of disrespect and actually face consequences? Tell me your stories in the comments below. And listen, if you're not subscribed to this channel yet, what are you waiting for? We break down the most insane courtroom moments like this every single week. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because trust me, there are more cases just as wild as this one coming your way. Don't miss out. Now let's talk about what happened after Brianna left that courtroom. Brianna's exit from the courtroom was nothing like her entrance, where she'd walked in with confident strides and a dismissive smirk just 15 minutes earlier. She now shuffled toward the door with her head down, shoulders hunched, one hand covering her face in a futile attempt to hide her tears from the cameras that followed her every step. The heavy courtroom door closed behind her with a soft thud that somehow felt louder than Judge Judy's gavel, sealing her exit from a space where she'd been completely and publicly dismantled. The gallery sat in the aftermath, that peculiar energy that follows moments of intense drama, when people need a few seconds to process what they've just witnessed. Slowly, spectators began turning to each other, whispering observations, sharing reactions. A woman in the second row leaned toward her companion, saying loud enough for nearby microphones to catch, "She learned today. Oh, she definitely learned today." Heads nodded in agreement throughout the room. Judge Judy turned her attention back to Mr. Chen, who still stood at his podium, looking somewhat dazed by the comprehensive victory he'd just received. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice notably warmer now, almost gentle in contrast to the steel it had contained moments before, "you'll receive your judgment. The show will cover the amount owed to you." Chen's face broke into a genuine smile of relief. "Thank you, Your Honor, thank you so much. I wanted her to understand, to take responsibility. I've been trying to get through to her for months." "Well, I think the message was delivered." Judge Judy's lips curved into a slight smile, the closest she typically came to expressing satisfaction with an outcome. Some people need to learn lessons the hard way. She just got an education in accountability that cost her nearly $3,000. She earned every penny of it. "Your Honor," Chen replied, shaking his head with a mixture of disbelief and vindication. "The damage was bad enough, but the attitude, the disrespect, I've never dealt with anything like that. You don't have to anymore. Good luck with your next tenant." Judge Judy closed the case file definitively, the gesture signaling this matter was concluded, sealed, finished. Chen gathered his folders, organizing them with the careful attention of someone who'd prepared thoroughly and been rewarded for that preparation. As Bailiff Byrd gestured him toward the exit, Chen walked with his head high, his posture reflecting the dignity of someone who'd stood his ground and been vindicated. The gallery offered him a smattering of supportive applause as he passed, a few people even giving him encouraging nods. The courtroom door closed behind him, and Judge Judy looked directly into the main camera, her expression shifting into that thoughtful, almost professorial look she adopted when delivering her signature wisdom beyond the specific case. "You know what this case was really about?" she asked, not expecting an answer but creating a moment of reflection. "It wasn't about carpet stains or broken cabinets. It was about character." She paused, letting the words settle over the viewing audience at home, the spectators in the gallery, everyone witnessing this moment. Miss Foster destroyed property, yes, but what really cost her today was her inability to accept responsibility. Every excuse she made, every eye roll, every dismissive gesture, every attempt to blame someone else, those were the real damages. Those were the character flaws that turned a bad situation into a disaster. The camera held on her face as she continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone who'd seen this pattern play out thousands of times over decades on the bench. "Respect isn't something you give when it's convenient. It's not a gift you bestow on people you think deserve it. Respect is a fundamental requirement of functioning in society, especially when you're facing consequences for your actions." Judge Judy removed her glasses, a gesture that typically signaled she was transitioning from judge to educator, from authority figure to truth-teller. That young woman is going to carry this experience with her for the rest of her life. Every time she has to make a payment on that judgment, she'll remember. Every time she writes a check, she'll think about the moment she mocked a judge and learned that actions have consequences. She stood, gathering her papers. Hopefully she learns. Hopefully this expensive lesson teaches her something about accountability, about respect, about growing up and taking responsibility for the messes you create. A pause. "But I've been doing this long enough to know some people never learn. Some people go through life blaming everyone else for their problems, never looking in the mirror, never accepting that they're the common denominator in all their disasters." The bailiff called out, "All rise," and the courtroom stood as Judge Judy descended from the bench, walking toward her chambers with the same confident stride she'd entered with. The door closed behind her and the cameras held on the empty bench for a moment before cutting away. But beyond the drama, beyond the applause and the tears and the devastating judgment, this case offers something profound for all of us watching from home, from our offices, from wherever we encounter this story. It's easy to watch someone like Brianna and think, "I'd never do that. I'd never be that disrespectful, that irresponsible." But the truth is, we all face moments where our character gets tested, where we have to choose between making excuses and taking accountability. The lesson here cuts deeper than just "don't mock Judge Judy," though that's certainly good advice. The real lesson is about integrity, about consistency between who we claim to be and how we actually behave when facing consequences. Brianna claimed she was a responsible tenant, but her actions told a different story. She claimed to be reasonable, but her behavior revealed arrogance and immaturity. Words matter. How we speak to people in authority, teachers, bosses, judges, even customer service representatives, reflects our character. Brianna learned a $3,000 lesson about the cost of disrespect, but that lesson applies to all of us in every interaction we have. Accountability isn't optional. When we make mistakes, and we all make mistakes, we have two choices: own them or make excuses for them. One path leads to growth and respect. The other leads to courtrooms and judgments and public humiliation. Brianna chose the second path, and she paid dearly for it. Preparation matters. Mr. Chen walked in with folders full of documentation, photographs, receipts, contractor estimates. He'd done his homework. Brianna walked in with attitude and empty hands. One person left victorious. The other left in tears. The difference wasn't luck. It was preparation meeting opportunity. Respect costs nothing but pays dividends. A simple "yes, Your Honor," a bit of humility, some genuine remorse, these things cost Brianna nothing. But her pride, her arrogance, her need to be right and deflect blame, those cost her nearly $3,000. Sometimes the most expensive thing we own is our ego. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever found yourself making excuses instead of owning a mistake? Have you ever let your pride cost you a relationship, a job, an opportunity? Have you ever disrespected someone in authority and immediately regretted it? We've all been there in some form. The question is, do we learn from those moments or do we repeat them? Judge Judy's courtroom serves as a mirror for society. The cases that unfold on that elevated bench aren't just about small claims and property disputes. They're about human nature, about character, about the consequences that follow us when we choose pride over humility, excuses over accountability, disrespect over dignity. Brianna walked into that courtroom as one person and walked out fundamentally changed, whether she realizes it yet or not. The cameras captured her transformation from confident to crushed, from arrogant to humiliated, from defensive to defeated. But more than that, they captured a universal truth. Eventually, we all face our Judge Judy moment. A moment where someone with authority looks at us and demands accountability. A moment where excuses don't work and charm doesn't help, and we're forced to confront the consequences of our choices. The only question is whether we'll face that moment with dignity and take responsibility, or whether we'll dig in our heels, make excuses, and make everything worse just like Brianna did. In the end, Judge Judy didn't just deliver a verdict. She delivered a masterclass in consequences, a lesson in respect, and a reminder that in life, just like in her courtroom, you reap exactly what you sow. So there you have it, from confident and cocky to completely destroyed in just 15 minutes. All because Brianna thought she could walk into Judge Judy's courtroom with attitude and walk out unscathed. Spoiler alert, nobody wins against Judge Judy when they show up unprepared and disrespectful. If you love this breakdown, and I mean, how could you not love watching justice get served that perfectly? Make sure you're subscribed to this channel right now. Seriously, click that subscribe button, because we post the wildest, most satisfying courtroom moments every single week. Judge Judy takedowns, shocking verdicts, defendants who get exactly what they deserve. It's all here. And you don't want to miss a single episode. Hit that notification bell too, so YouTube actually tells you when we upload. The algorithm is weird, and I don't want you missing out on cases even crazier than this one. Trust me, they exist. Now before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me, have you ever witnessed someone get instant karma like Brianna did? Have you ever been in a situation where someone's arrogance completely backfired on them? Drop your wildest stories below. I read every single comment, and honestly, some of your stories are better than the cases we cover. And here's a question that's going to get some debate going. Do you think Judge Judy was too harsh? Or did Brianna get exactly what she deserved? Be honest. Some of you might think $3,000 and a forced apology letter is too much. Others might think Judy should have gone even harder. Tell me where you stand. Let's get a conversation going in the comments. Oh, and if you thought this case was insane, wait until you see what happens when a defendant tries to lie to Judge Judy with video evidence. That video is popping up on your screen right now. It's absolutely wild. And you're going to want to watch it immediately after this one. The defendant's face when Judy plays the footage? Chef's kiss. Pure courtroom gold. Thanks for watching. And remember what we learned today. Respect costs nothing but disrespect. That'll cost you $2,690 plus a handwritten apology letter, plus your dignity on national television. Show respect, take accountability, and whatever you do, never, never mock Judge Judy in her own courtroom. I'll see you in the next one. Stay humble out there.